What's good, yo? Welcome back to the Playmaker's Corner podcast. I'm your host for today, Simon Villanos, aka Coach V, and this is episode 496, recorded today on February 18th, 2026 here, and I'm bringing you yet another episode. Make sure you check out episode 495 if you haven't yet. That's where we recapped all the games from here on out. That's how we will be separating these. The Tuesday episodes will be the recap episodes, and then on Thursday, these episodes will be the ones still talking about the previous week here, so games that happened between the Tuesday and Thursday episode aren't taken into account, but we're talking about the previous week. We are highlighting some great players and talking about rankings. And so on this episode, this is exactly what we are going to do. We're going to talk about Playmaker of the Week, right? And we're going to pick our Playmaker of the Week. Any great player from the NAIA level, the junior college level, the NCAA varsity level. We will pick a player that we felt like really turned it up for their team and played great. Then we have a new segment where we're going to talk about fantasy points and players. Yes, fantasy points as in fantasy football. We have done the math and we're going to talk about the players that had the highest fantasy point outputs this week and in a single game. We'll talk about those rankings when we get there. And then obviously we have our national rankings by myself, the other guys of the podcast, and then our voters, as there have been some movement already through week one. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into it. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about Playmaker of the Week. Make sure you check out episode 495. Periodically, you would hear, I don't know why, but sometimes I would forget at the end of recaps, but I would mention a player that I felt like was a playmaker of the game, somebody who I thought was really good and did their thing for their team to help them win. Playmaker of the Week is basically made up out of all those players, all the players who won Playmaker of the game. They are all candidates for this, and we pick who we feel like stood out the most and did their best for their team. And so I wanted to shout out a couple players here that I really felt like did their thing for their squads here, and obviously, performance and wins are tied, but Shania Spencer for Daytona State, she absolutely did her thing against Point. 180 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, did throw 3 picks, but made it up with 51 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and then caught 3 picks against Point in a win against them. And then to stay undefeated in their first game, Wood beat Andrew College by going for 224 yards, 7 touchdowns, caught 3 interceptions, returned 2 of them to the house in a big-time win for Daytona State as they start the season undefeated. On top of that, I wanted to shout out Mackenzie Hicks of Lisa McRae. They only played North Carolina Central, and that's a club team here, but she put up great numbers against them. 236 yards and 6 touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown in one game. 5 touchdowns and 4 rushing yards in another game. She did her thing absolutely there. Then there's Honest Watson of Ventura College all the way in California. This was a loss, right? But I wanted to mention her in their game against Saddleback. 13 receptions, 129 yards, and a touchdown. Absolutely going crazy against them. And then one more player that I wanted to mention here was Ariana Christian of Thomas. They are undefeated currently, and she played really well against LaGrange. 88 passing yards, 59 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 5 receptions, 44 yards. And then against Reinhardt in a close one, 4 receptions, 56 yards, a touchdown, a pass breakup, and that does include the game winner or eventual game winner that she would catch in overtime. So there you go, plenty of great players to pick from, but only one could be Playmaker of the Week, and I think I gotta go with the freshman quarterback athlete from Daytona State College, Shania Spencer, who put up great numbers, and usually it's not all about the numbers, but with Daytona State, a second-year program that we were really high on, somehow they exceeded expectations. She comes in, starts at quarterback, plays mostly well, and then defensively 5 interceptions to start the season, and then just throw this out there, 2 of those were touchdowns. You can't make it up. That's as good as it gets, as Daytona State dominated in their opening games this season. So there you go there. Our Playmaker of the Week is Shania Spencer of Daytona State. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about the fantasy point aspect that I was talking about in our intro. Basically, how we wanted to make it work. And no, this isn't sponsored by DraftKings or anything like that, even though, it could be. I'm just saying, basically, how this works is that we wanted to spotlight more players who had great statistical games. And so, in case you don't know what fantasy football is, basically, it involves fantasy points, and then you draft players who the better they do statistically, the more points they get you, right? So, for example, every touchdown they score, that's 6 points for your team. Rushing yards, passing yards, receiving yards, that counts 2 points towards your team, towards your player, right? So, say a player, and I don't want to get too specific here. Say a player got 10 receptions, 100 yards, and a touchdown, right? You get a point for each reception, so 10 points. You get another point for each for every 10 yards, so that would make it 20. And then a touchdown would go ahead and add 6, so that would be 26 points for that player. And so that's basically how that works, in case anybody was unfamiliar. I feel like mostly everyone is, though, but I just wanted to put that out there. How we would do it is that basically we would go through box scores, and this also maybe encourages some schools to maybe post more box scores so that we could recognize more players. But we would go through the box scores, we would go through articles that schools would post, find the stat lines, and then we would go ahead, or I guess I would go ahead, as in Coach V, me, because I did all these calculations, would go ahead and go into our fantasy points simulator. Shout out simulatedfootball.com, where you could go to a points calculator. The setting we would use is ESPN Standard, and then I would put in the stats. The only thing is that for some reason, when it comes to passing touchdowns on ESPN Standard, I guess that is 4 points instead of 6, and I know that because I went into the calculator and just messed around and figured that out. And so I basically put in everything else as is, and then I just changed the passing touchdowns to 6. So that way, every touchdown scored is 6. Passing, rushing, receiving. On defense, if you were able to score a touchdown through most likely a pick 6, you got that. If you were on defense as well, and there are stats there, basically how this works is that there's touchdowns, interceptions, sacks, pass deflections, and safeties. If it was listed or indicated that a player got those, I went ahead and noted those down. Now, mind you, it is ESPN Standard, so it calculates those a little bit different from individual. I don't know anybody outside of myself that has a defensive fantasy football league, but I know there are people who have individual defensive fantasy football leagues, and those points might look different. This is just based off of if a defense was to score a touchdown, pick, or sack, or a special teams was able to do that, that's how many points they would get. And so I just applied that to the player. And so basically I would go in there and input those stats and then come out with a top 10 here. I have a top 10 most points in a week. Remember, we did week 0 and week 1, so I just accumulated all the points I was able to find in those box scores. And then I accumulated the top 10 as in players who scored the most points in a game, and went about it that way. And so that's basically how all that works, how the recognition for that worked. And then on top of that, myself, Cody, and Gino actually drafted teams here, and whenever we get to that part, it's labeled PMC Fantasy League Recap. We will talk about it because our 3 teams basically competing against each other. Each team, we each got to pick players and defenses, and that's a fun new segment that we're going to add just based on our own knowledge here. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the other fantasy point recognitions. All right, now let's go ahead and start with the highest scorers from week 1, week 0. So combined in these 2 weeks. Now, mind you, these are going to be a little bit skewed because some teams played more games than others, right? But regardless, you need to play well to put up these stats, right? And so let's go ahead and start at number 10. We have Gianna Brown, the wide receiver from Emmanuel here. In her 2 games, had 6 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown, which was 21.1 fantasy points. And then 5 receptions for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's 24 fantasy points for a total of 45.34 fantasy points to start the season here. she rounds it out, or starts it, I guess, at 10. At 9, we have Thomas's very own Destiny Lockett, a true athlete here, who actually I think might be one of the only players who scored by having passing yards, rushing yards, receiving yards, and then also defensive stats here. Out of everyone in this top 10, which is crazy to say, but only played 2 games here. And here's what her stat line looked like. Against LaGrange at 147 passing yards, a touchdown, 2 picks, 24 rushing yards, though, a rushing touchdown, 3 receptions, and 30 yards. That totaled for 22.28 fantasy points. And then against Reinhardt at 172 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 6 rushing yards, 1 reception for 15 yards, a picked off pass, so that's an interception counting for her. And so that accounts for 24.10 fantasy points here for a total of 46.38 points, good enough for 9th in the nation, and here in week 1, week 0. Now at 8 is her teammate, actually, Ariana Christian of Thomas here. Like I said, another player, just like Destiny Lockett, who did a lot. Passing, rushing, receiving. I don't think she got defensive stats. Actually, just kidding. She did get defensive stats. So these two players from Thomas are the only ones who are able to score fantasy points in our top 10 that has a passing, receiving, rushing, and defensive stat here counting towards their total. And so her stat line would look like this. Against LaGrange, 88 passing yards, 59 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 5 receptions, 44 yards for a total of 30.82 fantasy points. And then against Reinhardt, 4 receptions, 56 yards, a touchdown, and a pass breakup for 15.6 fantasy points for a total of 46.42 points, just 0.4 ahead of her teammate Destiny Lockett. Moving on to number 7 in the country here, we have Honest Watson of Ventura College in game 1 for Ventura against Santa Barbara, I believe. She had 2 receiving touchdowns. I believe one of those went for 28 yards. She also picked off a pass here. I will say this, I was not able to get the total amount of yards. I was just able to get the yards that was mentioned in the story or in the news article that was posted, so that she could have had more, is all I'm saying. And then against Saddleback here in game 2, she had a great game. 13 receptions, 129 yards, and a touchdown here, and 2 pass deflections to go with that. That gives her a total of 31.9 fantasy points in that game there, with a total of 50.7 fantasy points after week 1, week 0, good enough for 7th in the country. Now, 6th in the country is Coriah Williams, the quarterback of Point here against Andrew College. 180 passing yards, 6 passing touchdowns for 43.2 points. And against Daytona State, a little bit more mute numbers here, but still 176 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, which does hurt those points there, so only 9 points. But in total, still 52.2 points, just ahead of 7th place by 2 points. Now, ahead of her by another 4 total points in 5th place is Lydiana De Silva of Daytona State against, I believe this is Andrew College. 3 receptions, 163 yards, and 3 touchdowns for a total of 37.3 points. Against Reinhardt, 3 receptions, 41 yards, against Point, 3 receptions, 41 yards, and 2 touchdowns and a pass breakup for 19.1 points for a total of 56.4 fantasy points after week 1, week 0. Now moving into our top 5 here, we're going more into our top 5. At number 4, we have Kenzie Fillion of Point, who is just 2 points total ahead of De Silva here in 5th. But against Daytona State, 6 receptions, 101 yards, also grabbed an interception. That totaled for 18.1 points. Against Andrew College, 5 receptions, 92 yards, 3 touchdowns, also 1 pass attempt for 66 yards. That went for a touchdown there for a total of 40.84 points here. And then in total, after week 1, week 0, right, 58.94 points So there you go there. Now going into our top three here, we have Sienna Johnson of Bruton Parker Christian. Their quarterback, or would play a lot of quarterback here. She played, I will say this, played 4 games. She had 28.84 points, 20.5 points, and then her games in week 1 were a little bit more like slowed down, right? 2.66 points and then 13.62 points. Sorry, that would be the week 1 game, as a 2.66 point game would be the last one in that week 0 game. But still, for a total of 65.62 points. Like I said, if you play a lot of games, it definitely benefits you. I don't expect any team to play more than 4 games here, so this is maybe a little bit of an outlier, but still, top 3 is top 3. Now moving on, in our second place spot is Mackenzie Hicks of Lise McRae. Yes, I'm counting it. I mean, it's still a performance by a varsity team here playing for Lise McRae. Like I said, we're here to encourage complete box scores and stats being posted so that we could better cover players. But she played North Carolina Central twice, their club team twice, and she had great games. 236 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception, and then a rushing touchdown and 10 yards. Good enough for 50.44 points. And then 136 yards, 5 touchdowns, a pick, 4 yards, good enough for 33.84 points. In that single day, scored 84.28 points here against that team. So there you go there. But at number 1 is also our playmaker of the week here, Shania Spencer of Daytona State. A total of 105.26 fantasy points. She scored 36.3 against Point, and then against Andrew College, 68.96 points. The pick sixes really went her way, and then on top of that, 7 touchdowns against Andrew College as well. Absolutely stuffing the stat sheet, which is why she's also, it's a reason why she's also our playmaker of the week. So there you go there. Those are your leaders for total fantasy points through week 1, week 0, or sorry, in the weeks of week 1, week 0. And so, just to be clear, right, when we do these fantasy points, rankings and totals, right, it's not going to be like week by week, like total. It's going to be how many they were able to gain in that week. So, boom, there you go there. All right, now moving on, we're going to talk about our single game fantasy leaders, fantasy points leaders. These are the players that scored the most fantasy points in a single game, either in week 1 or week 0, right? So no multiple games. These are just the players that scored the most points, okay? Now, starting at number 10, we have Honest Watson of Ventura College in her game against Saddleback, where she scored 31.90 points. Remember, that's the game here where she had 13 receptions, 129 yards, a touchdown, and 2 pass breakups. At number 9 is actually Ashley Alvarado of Lise McRae versus North Carolina Central, where she had 5 receptions for 97 yards and 3 touchdowns, the hat trick for 32.7 points. In 8th is her teammate, the person throwing her the ball, Mackenzie Hicks of Lise McRae, in one of their games against North Carolina Central, where she had 136 yards and 5 touchdowns. Good enough by 1 point, having 33.84 points. Just ahead of her is the quarterback of Ventura College, Ava Ortman, in her game against Santa Barbara Community College here. Now, I don't have the passing yards, but I do have the touchdown and interception total. First off, she didn't throw any interceptions, but she did throw 6 touchdowns, so there you go. That's 36 fantasy points. In 6th here is Shania Spencer's performance against Point for Daytona State, where she had 180 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks, thrown picks, 51 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, but did catch 3 interceptions against them. In 5th is her teammate Liliana Da Silva of Daytona State in her performance against Andrew College. 3 receptions, 3 touchdowns, 163 yards. That's 37.30 fantasy points. In 4th is Kenzie Fillion of Point in her performance against Andrew College. 5 receptions, 92 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then that big 66-yard touchdown, for 43.2 fantasy points. In second, we have Mackenzie Hicks of Lisa McRae in another game against North Carolina Central. 236 yards, 6 touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown, good enough for 50.44 fantasy points. And then at number 1, your single game fantasy leader after week 1, week 0 is Shania Spencer once more. But this time, her game against Andrew College, 224 yards, 7 touchdowns, 3 caught interceptions, 2 of those being pick sixes, for a total of 68.96 fantasy points, being statistically the most productive player after week 1 or in week 1, week 0. So there you go there. That is your top 10 in single game fantasy points. Alrighty, now let's talk about our PMC Fantasy League here, because I think it's a really cool idea. This was something that myself, Cody, and Gino thought about. So basically, here's what we have. We have a fantasy league, and it is made up of women's college flag football players. Yes, you are hearing that correctly. Each week, we will set our lineups, and ultimately, we're going to see who knows most about women's college flag football, right? We got bragging rights on the line here. So basically how this works is that we pick players. We drafted players to our teams, and, statistically how well they do week by week is how many points they get. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say this. I'm the only one who paid attention because I'm the only one who had a player that played in week 1, week 0. Shout out Destiny Lockett, 32.38 fantasy points for me. Now, I only listed her at wide receiver, so her defensive stats don't exactly count. And so that's, here, let me backtrack a little bit here. Here's the positions we have, okay? We have 2 quarterbacks, 3 receivers, 2 flex players, and then a defense or special teams of a team that we could pick, okay? Now, if we list a player at quarterback or wide receiver, we can only use their stats on the offensive side of the ball. If we list them at flex or in one of our 2 flex positions, we could use their fantasy points from both the offensive and defensive side if they were to score or get flagpoles, picks, stuff like that, right? And so that's basically how that would work. Yes, we can add and drop players. We haven't done it yet, or I haven't done it yet because I didn't see a point to doing it, and I have a lot of great players that I want to keep. But I do think one of the more interesting things about this is that we are very reliant on teams putting in stats, right? Now, our personal fantasy league may not be enough motivation to put in stats, but the growth of flag football is. And so that's why we're doing it. And so if a team doesn't put in stats, hey, that's tough. I guess I'm just going to win every week. Or, somebody else is going to win, I'm sure, every other week as well. So let's go ahead. Like I said, I already said I won week 1. I'm the only one who really set my lineup here. So shout out Destiny Lockett at Thomas. Shout out Thomas because I believed in you for doing the right thing and putting in stats even though you're playing away. Love to see that, okay? So, ding, 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 week 1 winner, that's me. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and list off the teams currently that myself, Cody, and Gino have here in week 1. As of right now, week 1, week 0. Nobody has been dropped yet, so that's a good thing. Let's start with my team. Quarterbacks right now, Shahiro Owada from Kansas Wesleyan, Terry Lorente of Baker, Destiny Lockett, I drafted originally as a wide receiver linebacker, but, it's our fantasy league. And unless Cody and Gino say something about that being cheating, hey, I drafted her as a receiver. She's happening to play quarterback. A lot of people drafted Taysom Hill as a tight end. He happens to play quarterback. Sucks to suck, you got to see these things through. Anyways, there you go. Those are my 2, technically 3 quarterbacks right now. At wide receiver, Krista Quinn of Milligan. I have Marley Spielberg, who I'm listing out an athlete out of Ottawa. Like I said, another player who I think is going to play receiver, but might also play quarterback. Hey, Taysom Hill, that's the Taysom Hill effect. So there you go. I also have Riley Bolser of Weber, Sophia Guitron of Kaiser, and Deshae Branham of Life. And you also got to remember, if I put them in the flex spot, if they play defense, I also get the production and points that they put in on defense. And then the defense / special teams I drafted is Kaiser's defense. So there you go. Now, Cody's team, looks like this currently. His two quarterbacks is Katherine Hutchinson of Warner, who kind of just went off yesterday, but we'll see if they put in stats or not. And then he has Ava Wallace of Kaiser. His receiver group here basically is Aaliyah Wood of Kansas Wesleyan, Ashley Clam of Kaiser, Alyssa Linkus of Ottawa, Brenna Ramirez of Kaiser, Omariah Gordon of Warner, and then his one defensive player that he added, I guess she also plays receivers, actually Addie Schillick of William Woods. All right, now we have Gino's team. Let's start with the quarterbacks. One of his quarterbacks is Bridget Kaiser from Milligan. The other one is Olivia Cadis from Ottawa. He also has Sanaya Waller, who plays, throws the ball here and there. Listed as an athlete from Baker, but I'm sure he'll throw in at the wide receiver spot. You have Anna Vincenzini. Let's talk about wide receivers, by the way, or receivers in general. You have Vincenzini. He has Finley, who both had great games. Caitlin Sigmundy. He has Janasia Wilson, Tatiana Dos Santos, and then he has Ottawa's defense. Did I say Cody? Oh, yeah, Cody has Warner's defense, by the way. So there you go there. And we're going to be updating you. Currently, as the winningest player in PMC Fantasy League history, feeling pretty good. Feeling pretty good with where I am at here. Now, I'm already just going to put this out there. I think there's going to be a rule change as far as receivers playing quarterback and whatnot. But, if we don't know beforehand, it is what it is. We'll just see what happens. These are the players we drafted. So, super excited to follow up with this. We thought this would be super lighthearted and fun. And, it just shows the players that we really believe in here. But, moving forward, we got 10 weeks, 12 weeks of this. There's going to be some changes. Some players that we got to drop, some players we got to add, maybe some defenses we got to drop and add. We will see what happens. Alrighty, now let's go ahead and talk about our National Women's College Flag Football rankings. I'm just going to be honest. Did not think we would have to update these after week 1, but we did end up having to do that. And so, basically how this works is that we have voters from all over. Myself, Cody, Gino, we have former players. We have current Team USA coaches. Shout out our guy Nate over there. And then we have other media as well. Shout out Women's College Flag Football.com. Make sure you go ahead and check them out here. And so basically how it works is that we each rank them 1 through 25. If we rank a team, if any of us rank a team at 1, they get 25 points. 2, 24, 3, 23. And then I basically add up all the points, right? And then I put out the top 25. The teams who got the most points. And so if there are any teams that have ties, that means they got the same amount of points. That's basically how I am averaging this. And so currently there weren't many changes. In fact, outside of myself, Cody, and Gino, everyone else actually kept their votes pretty much the same here. But in case you missed it, let's go ahead and shout out those preseason rankings and say it real quick here. So teams that got points but were just outside the top 25 is Barden, Southwestern, Irvine Valley, Florida Memorial, Saddleback, Mount St. Mary's, La Sierra, Gallaudet, Benedictine Mesa, Eastern, Arizona Christian, and Mars Hill. And then to start our 25, at 25 is Ferrum, 24 Cumberland, 23 Marymount, 22 St. Francis, 22 King, 20 Lisa McRae, tied at 18 is Daytona State and Lindsey Wilson, 17 William Woods, 16 Siena Heights, 15 Life, 14 Graceland, 13 Campbellsville, 12 Midland, 11 Wingate, 10 Weber, 9 Thomas, 8 Kansas Wesleyan, 7 St. Thomas, 6 Milligan, 5 Florida Gateway, 4 Baker, 3 Warner. At 2, getting a first place vote is Kaiser, and then at number 1 were the rest of the first place votes in Ottawa. And so that was last week. Now going into this week, here's what the just out looks like. We have Mars Hill, Arizona Christian, Eastern, Benedictine Mesa, Gallaudet, La Sierra, Mount St. Mary's, Saddleback, Florida Memorial, Southwestern, Barden, and then Irvine Valley, actually. I want to go ahead and mention Irvine Valley here. So they actually moved up points-wise quite a bit. Myself and Gino ranked them after their performance from the last couple weeks here. they play really good football. Shout out to Kayla Chappell and that squad over there and all the great coaches. Currently they're undefeated. Don't sleep on them just yet. It's going to be interesting to see how they play some of these other teams in California. But Irvine Valley, we definitely see you, as they currently sit only 3 spots away from the top 25. So there you go. Now, looking at these rankings as a whole here, not too many changes. The top 8 is pretty much the same here, but you have a lot of changes. I would probably say more in the mid part or bottom half of these rankings for the most part, and I'll explain as I go. So currently, right now, tied at 24. Yes, tied at 24 is Ferrum and Cumberland. Both of them have 16 points. Ferrum actually moves up slightly a spot here. I think Ferrum was actually ranked at 25 last week, and they move up a spot as they go ahead and gain some ground on Cumberland. That is basically what happens when we move some teams around, and that is a result of that, not really more so those teams. Now, staying the same right here is Marymount at 23, St. Francis at 22, King at 21, Lees McRae at 20. Like I said, nothing changing there. But moving down a spot is Lindsey Wilson, who moves down slightly here, only by 1 spot. Like I said, it's because of teams ahead of them, teams ahead of them winning and playing games. As they win and play games, that could definitely look different here. But we're going to talk about those teams soon. Now, at 18 is our first big change here, and it's Graceland. Graceland moves down 4 spots here from 14. Did not play a game, but that is on purpose, okay? Everyone else kept their rankings the same. And so this is where I take a lot of the responsibility of it, because I actually took Graceland outside of my top 25, and here's the reason. As of right now, February 18th, we got the news a couple days ago, Coach Aaron Richardson of Graceland has accepted another job at a D2. Now, their season starts in a couple weeks. We have no idea as of right now if he will be able to coach through the season. From what we have seen from other NAIA schools, when a coach has accepted a job elsewhere, they usually want that coach out immediately, or at least from what we've seen, they've left immediately, right? And some who have wanted to stay haven't been able to, and so I'm going to assume as of right now that he has left Graceland. Now, if I am wrong and he will actually coach Graceland through the season, I will restore Graceland to back where they are. But I cannot put Graceland in my top 25 without knowing if Coach Richardson is there or not. And that's just a lot of respect to Coach over there. I respect him a whole bunch, right? I think he's a great coach over there. He turned this program around. Last year, they had a lot of the same players as the year before, and I felt like they did significantly better. I mean, he was also able to bring in some players, and they did significantly better. Just because you have the same roster doesn't mean you are going to be as good as you were with a different coach. And there are some teams with different coaches and different rosters that applies to right now. But that's just where I'm at, and so that's why Graceland has dropped here to 4. Like I said, I'm the only one who's dropped them, so I'll take that responsibility. If I am wrong and he is going to coach through this season, I'll restore them back-ish to where they are supposed to be in the top 25, but this is tough news for Graceland. Great news for Coach Richardson. Shout out him. Congratulations. Super well deserved, right? But this is tough to hear weeks before the season starts. So there you go. Now, tied at 16, we have 2 teams who move up as a result of Graceland falling, and one of them as a result of a bunch of wins. That's Daytona State here and William Woods, both tied at 16. Let's talk about William Woods here real quick. They're moving up because Graceland drops. Now let's go ahead and talk about Daytona State here. They're moving up because Graceland drops, and they also had some very dominant wins. Yes, it was against Angel College, a first-year program, and then Point, but I feel like this is an improved Point team, and big wins are big wins. They got something special there with Shania Spencer, the coaching staff, that group here. They recruited extremely well, and it is showing early on. We'll see if they can keep it up and continue the climb. Now, the next two teams that we're going to talk about here move up basically because Graceland moves down. At 15, that's Siena Heights, and then 14, that is Life. The next three teams after that are the same. Campbellsville at 13, Midland at 12, Wingate at 11. Although, I will say this about Wingate. Wingate, they get a shot at Kaiser and Ottawa, even if they lose one of those. A win against one of those programs completely shatters and shakes up our college polls here. Just one, and they get an opportunity at both. I think they also play Warder too. So massive. Excited about that. Excited to see Wingate in action. They could make some moves here. Now going into our top 10 here, we have a tie at 9. It's Thomas and Weber. Thomas stays right here, but Weber actually moves up slightly a spot. And Weber hasn't played yet, and so the reason why they moved up a spot is because points were taken away from Thomas. Myself and Gino moved them down a little bit. Now, this is what Cody said. Cody said he doesn't want to punish teams for, being undefeated, right? Or jumping the gun or anything like that. So they're staying the same for him. Me and Gino, we looked at Thomas. We watched the game. The LaGrange game went how we thought it should, right? They're figuring some things out. The Reinhardt game, they won it in overtime, but let's be honest, it's not because Reinhardt was lucky, They was right in there, and maybe Reinhardt should be ranked, and should be ranked a little bit higher, and should be getting points, right? But currently, they are not getting points. And so, to risk a game, and this is just from a ranking standpoint, right? To risk a game against a team like that, and for it to be so close, a game that we felt like they should have won in regulation and didn't even think about overtime being a possibility, it's a little concerning, right? And looking at Thomas, look, they're undefeated, but they got some things to figure out on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, like I said this in the preview I did for them, I really wasn't worried. Offensively, I have no idea who their quarterback is. I speculated it could be a couple players, but what I did not speculate was that it would be Destiny Lockett. And, she didn't play bad. Is she the best quarterback in Thomas history? No. And I do think that, taking a receiver, an elite receiver out and putting her at quarterback and for her to play okay, and for them to only tie against a Reinhardt team, it's not exactly a vote of confidence. And so Thomas doesn't technically move down, but they are tied with Weber at 9 because there is a little bit of a shake of confidence in them. Now, we'll see if they could bounce back and continue to prove us wrong. Like, if they're undefeated, we're not going to be able to drop them out of the top 10. That's just what it is. At least not realistically, I don't think. But, for them to beat some of these teams ahead of them in the top 10, they're going to have to play better than what they did against Reinhardt. A lot better. So, we'll see what happens, though. And then, like I said, the top 8 is pretty much the same. 8, Kansas Wesleyan. 7, St. Thomas. 6, Milligan. 5, Florida Gateway. 4, Baker. 3, Warner. 2 is Kaiser. Number 1 is Ottawa. As of today, or maybe not as of today, as of Monday, last Monday, February 16th, it is updated. After week 2, we will update this again, and so that'll include games from the 16th on all the way to that Sunday. So there you go there. Those are our rankings. I will say it one more time. Tied at 24, Ferrum, Cumberland. 23, Marymount. 22, St. Francis. 21, King. 20, Lisa McRae. 19, Lindsey Wilson. 18, Graceland. Tied at 16, Daytona State and William Woods. 15, Siena Heights. 14, Life. 13, Campbellsville. 12, Midland. 11, Wingate. Tied at 9th is Thomas and Weber. 8th, Kansas Wesleyan, St. Thomas at 7, Milligan at 6, Florida Gateway at 5, Baker at 4, Warner at 3, Kaiser at 2, and at number 1 is Ottawa. This week, it is about to go down, though. So many of these teams in the top 25 are playing, and they are playing each other. So be ready for some pretty crazy shakeup, I feel, after week 2. It should be a good one, so stay tuned for that. Alrighty, thank you so much for rocking with us. Make sure you check out episode 495 here for the full game recaps. And then make sure you check us out on social media at Playmaker's Corner, and then our website as well, playmakerscorner.com. All of the recognition that we just said right here, we will be making sure that we post on our website and on our social media, so that way you can check out all the great athletes that performed and showed out through week 1, week 0. Just as a reminder, we will be doing 2 episodes a week, Tuesday, Thursday. Tuesday episode is recap. Thursday episode is all the recognition, plus our fantasy point stuff and rankings. So there you go. And so week 2 for us will be, I think it's February 17th or February 16th through February 16th through February 22nd. That will be week 2. We'll cover all of those games on the Tuesday episode that comes out on February 24th. So there you go there. Thank you so much for rocking with us. Have a good weekend, and we'll catch you later.